Welcome back to Coaches Exploring the Untethered Soul by Michael Singer. And today we're on to the last chapter, sadly, for me anyway. Chapter 19, The Loving Eyes of God. I'll just read the first paragraph like I usually do, and then we can dive right in. How can anyone really know anything about God? We have so many teachings, so many concepts, so many views about God, but they've all been touched by people. In the end, it's amazing how much our ideas about God conform to the different cultures from which they come. Fortunately, deep within us, there's a direct connection to the divine. There's a part of our being that is beyond the personal self. You can consciously choose to identify with that part rather than with the psyche or the body.
The first thing that struck me when I read that paragraph was the last sentence when he says, it's amazing how much our ideas about God conform to the different cultures from which they come. And in that sentence, I just replaced it, God, with anything. It's amazing how much our ideas about anything can conform to the cultures from which we come, they come. Seemed like it's all subjective.
This chapter for me, I don't know, it was interesting because I was noticing initially a high level of discomfort with all the God talk, is the way I'd put it. Mostly because, I mean, I grew up with parents that were Salvation Army ministers. So, God and religion were quite common concepts. And I think for most of certainly my teenage years was something that I deeply rejected as teenagers do, regardless of what their parents are into. I think that's fairly common. But, as I've gotten into all these teachings with three principles and this book and so on, I hadn't really thought of things in terms of the word God and more just spirituality, which, I guess is the same thing, but the something about the constant references here to God initially had me, I don't know, squirming a little bit, I guess, until I let go of all that thinking around that too.
What a lovely thing to know about yourself.
Mm.
Yeah.
I was going to say some Skara had come up, Greg.
Definitely.
The whole concept of identifying with that part of you, that took me by surprise. Because the identification always I associated with identifying with, a part of your ego, identifying, with some thought or a belief. But the notion of identifying with the part of you that's the spirit, that was cool. That's one that made my mind go quiet. Particularly like when you let go of all the human things, you just naturally fall into that space of the deeper intelligence. But the conscious identification of it, I feel like there was something really deep and profound there that settled me throughout the chapter. Even that, wow, that's possible. It's almost like ego, like, oh, I will never be gone. I'm like, okay, that's my ego talking, but it was cool.
Yeah, I love how he sort of roots this in, when he used the word truth. Truth in the sense that it's also provable, let's say, through experience. In the end of the second paragraph, He says, just as rain makes you wet and fire makes you warm, you can know the nature of God by looking into the mirror of your transformed self. This is not a philosophy, it's a direct experience, which I think can, on the one hand, it can sort of kind of rock your boat a little bit, thinking, well, oh my goodness, all this stuff that I actually know, and I know that the earth's round, okay, but I also know my next door neighbor tends to throw his junk into my garden, and like that's a thing, that's kind of a thing I've got to worry about. But now we're talking about God, and like nobody knows if he really exists or not, and we're not really sure about this. But then we're talking about experience. We're not talking about the thing, the rubbish that your next door neighbor flings into your garden or anything else. We're talking about the experience that we have. And that is visible, let's say, or it's feelable at least. And that for each and every one of us is true. So in the same light that the experience of back to the metaphor, the neighbor chucking the rubbish in your garden is as experienceable as is God himself. It's there, puts it right in front of you.
Gives a whole new meaning to proving the existence of God, doesn't it?
Mm.
All the references in here to, your spiritual self or your spiritual being. I mean, since the beginning of reading this book, the word "you" is always like, whenever anyone says, "I feel this way" or "you this," I'm like, which you are they talking about? Which I am I talking about? And so I've really started seeing myself, I guess, traveling in the direction he describes. I kind of have some, I don't know, uncertainty or things to still to reflect on and figure out about, because to me he's pointing to and talking a lot about the formless, but then using language that describes direction and um, spatial awareness that doesn't jive for me within the formless. Like there is no up, down, back, drifting up kind of thing. So I was having a hard time relating to the directional nature of what he's describing. I don't know if anyone else had that kind of
I did.
Yeah.
I'm glad you said that, because I was like, why can't I get this?
Get this. Yeah. Me too.
It's a different kind of experience for me. It's not directional so much, but
Yeah.
that is interesting.
Yeah. Well, because the way he describes it too, it's almost like it's a felt experience. The way he describes it is like I would feel myself moving in a direction, like as if I was in a car or on a roller coaster or something. Like that's, but and maybe he's just speaking metaphorically and I'm taking it too literal.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, but that, I mean, that for me, this chapter isn't going to be a one and done kind of thing. I think it's one to come back to.
Mm.
So, Greg, when you do have that sort of experience, if you've ever had it, what's it like? How would you describe it?
A great question. I mean, the first word that came to my mind was dissolving, like a dissolving of my earthly self, and what's left is a spiritual self. And then the second word that came to my mind was awakening. But it's, to me, there's a stillness. Like the feeling I have is a stillness. There's not a movement. of associated to it, like he's describing. I don't know. That's just what's occurring to me as you ask that question.
For me, it's even different. It's more, I like that word dissolving, but that's not quite right. For me, it's more a letting go and an expansion into the nothingness, which is kind of like dissolving. It's a diluting until there's nothing but that. How about the rest of you?
Well, listening to your conversation, my mind drifted to the TV show The Legend of Korra. Does any of you know that?
Know the name.
Yeah. It's a cartoon series. Slightly adult, I think. But it's got some cool spiritual inclinations, and there's one bad guy, as it turns out. He's got this saying where he goes, "Let go of your earthly tether, enter the void, empty and become wind." And then he jumps off a cliff and he flies, as it turns out. But the actual words of letting go of your earthly tether, and that takes me to Star Trek Discovery, where one of the quotes was, everyone's weakness is more often than not is somebody else, like another person. There's some kind of an attachment, there's some kind of a bond that keeps you tethered to the physical world. So in this particular show, in Legend of Korra, it's about the moment this bad guy's partner get killed in this fight, everything that he's attached to is let go of, and then he's able to do these superhuman things, like he's in that spiritual space. So listening to your conversation, it just took me to what are the things that are keeping us tethered to this world? What are the things that is still desired by the ego, whether it's, our wife, our kids, or, friends or parents, whatever. And, but the cool part is, like, it's possible to let go of all that without any of them dying, and then be able to really be connected to them. That's where my mind was drifting as I was listening to you.
Karen, can you do me a favor? I only filled my cup half.
I love the paradox of the untethering to become truly connected. Like the idea that you have to disconnect to become connected.
Yeah, that for me, that resonates for me in a very sort of simple way. The idea of just the idea that you're only, not only, we're always connected, but sort of you can feel the connection perhaps in the moment that you let go of everything that is created by our brain differently from what's created by mind. So our beliefs, our thoughts, our which every single thing, and then we can be free to live freely on this earth. I think there's often a sort of an association. Oh well, the only moment that I'm going to be free is when I've died and my spirit's floated off to somewhere. But so people could say, well, I don't belong in the spiritual realm because it's the afterlife, it's somewhere else. But this idea of our whole being absolutely connected, maybe, or let's say grounded on this earth through the connections that we make, and they're never something that they're not our beliefs, they're not what we're thinking about, they're not our family, they're not anything else.
It occurs to me from from the principles realizations, like when people go inside out, like when they realize that it's not outside in, that is a form of letting go too, is it not? And it happens so beautifully and so effortlessly. And then you are so much more connected to people, to the world, and yeah, and it resonates what you're saying, like it's so much more simpler when we see it.
I had a moment when I was reading this chapter where I had to stop and say, do I want to let go of all that? And then I kept reading, and it clarified that it's not that you're going to float away. It's a little different than that later in the chapter. So that was helpful. But I remember that moment as I was reading it, like, do I really want to let go of everything? I think I've come to the answer. I'd like to find out what that's like. Yes.
It is that paradox, isn't it? Like you let go of everything, but then you're one with everything.
Page 284, I highlighted what you begin to feel is that you're going into your spiritual being. As you associate less with the physical and psychological parts of your being, you begin to identify more with the flow of pure energy. You used to walk around feeling anxiety and attention. Now you walk around feeling love. You just feel love for no reason. Your backdrop is love. Your backdrop is openness, beauty, and appreciation. You don't have to make yourself feel that way. That is how spirit feels. For me, there's just kind of an answer to your question, Vanessa. Do I want to let go? Well, if that's what I'm letting go to get, or to be in that state, it sounds like a pretty good deal.
Well, it doesn't look like a trade anymore for me.
Yeah.
It looks like just a different perspective that includes everything in a different way.
Yeah, what's occurring to me as I listen to all of you is that it's not, to me, and it's like right now, it seems like it's not an either or. You know, it doesn't seem like it doesn't seem like an either or. It doesn't seem like there's something to choose, because that seems very much outside and very much form, as opposed to sort of a state of being, I guess.
I appreciate this last two sentences, Greg. You don't have to make you feel this way. This is how the spirit feels. I mean, there's so much of the personal developmental world. It's, doing things to feel better, or to get somewhere to feel better. But this, you don't have to do that. It's just tapping onto that updraft that already feels this way. It's like, oh, we can let go of that task, so to speak.
Yeah, very subtractive. And what Lynne just said, what came up to me is how Sid Banks refers to the illusion of separation. Like it's, to your point, it's not an either or. It's like that the either or is an illusion. Near the end, we start talking about God not being judgmental, like being pure love. and all this kind of stuff. I think that this is what helped me let go of some of my um, I don't know, consternations about religion and and things like um, my wife's Catholic, and I often joke with her about the Catholic guilt. Um, and I love the idea, or what Singer's pointing to here about the non-judgmental nature. Like, what if it were true that God is not judging? What if God is loving? Like, there's nothing to apologize for. And I love all the metaphors he uses about the sunshine, and like, if you choose not to, if you choose to go live in the darkness, go fill your boots. Like, you know, when you come back, the sun will still be there. It doesn't matter.
And his correlation to mother's love, it correlates so beautifully. It's just that respect, that idea of, oh yeah, the sun's still going to be there, the light is still loves you regardless. It had that very nurturing feeling about it. That random thought, does that correlate to like a mother's love is indeed, and I mean in the purest sense, is in a way the closest to divine love in a human form? It's just there. I mean, I know every mum is different and so on and so forth, but I don't know, that connection sparked that thought. And
Maybe
yeah.
the mother's love in the purest form. I know I didn't get that from my mother. I got it from my grandmother, but not my mother.
yeah,
Yeah, I think
definitely in the purest form. Yeah, I agree.
I'm wondering if the word itself is metaphorical anyway. It doesn't mean your mum, my mum, or anybody else's mum, but it means more like the mother of all things, the mother of nature, the mother of life itself. Perhaps, I don't know, just an idea flashed through my head. Okay. And when sort of for evolutionary reasons, I'm wondering if, in particular, the mother of humans and the mother of animals and the mother of things, biologically, physiologically, and also mentally and spiritually, needs to carry out a certain way of being, a certain way of doing as an example, so that life can continue. That's the sense of mother, I think, that we say the mother. I think though it alludes to something much greater than a mother's love, and then it's been coined sort of over the years in that way. Because mums at the beginning do tend to be very loving kind of thing, but of course, as you notice, not always. And who says? So I don't think mother means actually the female counterpart who produces children in the family unit. I don't think it means that.
I think it's a notion of loving your children no matter what, and linking that to that, or son's going to be there loving you regardless what you've been in the dark or not. That connection is. But it's hard to use human, roles and love. It gets very fast, and
Found that the part I was referring to before. He says on my page 291, what if that is how God looks upon his creation, that you've lost out if you've been told otherwise. Instead of being encouraged to feel completely protected, loved, honored, and respected by the divine force, you've been taught that you're being judged because you've been taught that you feel guilt and fear. The reality is that God's way is love, and you can see this for yourself. And I think when I think back to, like, my rejection of religion and stuff, it had to do with that, um, you know, some to do with the idea of being judged by God, and some of it to do with being judged by man. Like, who's this dude in a robe telling me what I can or can't do, or should or shouldn't do? Um, the middleman. I used to, think of, I don't need a middleman between me and my God or whatever. I can, um, so I really resonate and like this notion. The reality is that God's way is love.
Which, to me, Greg, just on the back of that, sort of transcends religion as such. Because it's not about religion. Religion is a man-made thing.
Yeah.
Religion is form.
Yeah, it's outside.
Right.
As is the Bible. Somebody wrote it on a piece of paper or parchment,
And
or whatever.
it's all metaphors.
Yeah.
I have a love-hate relationship with metaphors. My engineering brain likes black and white better.
Yeah.
And metaphors have gray edges.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I don't remember which recording it is, but Sid talks about that the wise people of the past, or the sages or whatever, they can only, it's because it's formless. You can only talk to it in metaphor. Like, you can't, you can't explain it in black and white, because it's by its very nature, it's not black and white.
As are all the experiences that we have. My experience of, let's say, fear is not any of your experiences of fear. So that they cannot but be, that there is no black and whites. They cannot be there.
Do you think our experience of God it has to be, right? I'm sorry, I was thinking aloud. I guess our experience of God will be different and unique to each one of us too, right?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Although I think we might find some similarities.
Yeah.
Because I think he mentions in that chapter that the great mystics that have touched God, they have similar experiences. And that's how you can tell.
And I presume that those experiences that they might have had will go back to the origin, let's say, where as we learn, and from Sid Banks, it goes back to love and understanding. And those are the only experiences that we need to have.
One thing that interested me is when he started to talk about, I think it's towards the end of the chapter, letting go of judgment as a way to move towards this space of being one with God. That's very interesting to me, and it's actually kind of funny, because I thought, oh, I've let go of judgment. But then I realized, as we were talking, I recently judged something, actually quite severely. Maybe I'm not where I thought I was. I am, in fact, human.
Mm.
Yes, I don't know if the bit, I think it's worth reading, Vanessa. I don't know if this was the bit you're referring to when he says, what if it is really true that God is not judging? What if God is loving? We all know that true love doesn't judge. Love sees nothing but beauty in its beloved. There is no impurity. There is no possibility of impurity. No matter what it beholds, it is all beautiful. I don't know if anybody's noticing, but I'm struggling for words in this chapter. It's
Yeah, I
and
am.
I'm noticing a nice feeling between us as well. It's yeah.
It reminds me of, I think it's, I hope I get this right, Michael Neal's metaphor. We're trying to point to fire with ice.
Yeah.
Mm.
The more we try, it melts away.
The word that's coming up too, in relation to judgment, is worthy or worthiness. That in an absence of judgment, there's also an absence of worthiness or worthlessness.
Mm.
You can't, like you you know, in if it's true what Singer's pointing to in terms of God's unconditional love, then there's nothing to prove. There's nothing to be worthy. Like you already are worthy.
Mm.
You can't, there is no judgment. He says,
Worthiness is a foregone conclusion.
yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, prerequisite.
Mm.
He says, I highlighted this part. People say that God cries when he looks at this earth. The saint sees that God goes into ecstasy when he looks upon this earth under all conditions and at all times. Ecstasy is the only thing God knows. God's nature is eternal, conscious bliss. No matter what you've done, you're not going to be the one that ruins it.
Mm.
Can you read that last little bit again, Greg? I don't know where it is, but
Yeah, it's near the for me it's 294, the second last page of the chapter.
It's almost at the very end of the
God's
chapter.
nature is eternal, conscious bliss. No matter what you've done, you're not going to be the one that ruins it.
That's it. No matter what you've done, you're not going to be the one who ruins it.
Mm.
It really brings to light, like, oh yeah, like I've heard horror stories, but my story, like that's the worst. Or like what I've done, that can't be all my lack of worthiness or my not good enough or my shame. Oh yeah, that's so to hear on from when when you hear people say things like that, to go, no, even that can't tarnish the windscreen, or the radar or whatnot.
The thing
It's
that's
very
occurring to me is
powerful.
which is kind of a theme in the last little bit of the book is the needless suffering that we cause ourselves.
Mm.
Innocently.
Mm.
Like I can imagine, like, buying into the idea that like I've pissed God off, or I've I'm so bad that God is ashamed of me, or I don't know, whatever. It's like that's such needless suffering being imposed upon yourself.
Yeah.
And I mean, I suppose we talked about judgment, and until just now, I'd been thinking of judgment as me judging other things or other people, or whatever. And what just occurred to me when I was talking there was the whole self-judgment.
Mm.
And then what that could mean for people or for myself to be free of self-judgment.
Mm.
I wonder if judgment has a link to shame, because if you knew you were okay, and if you really knew that there was nothing wrong with you, would you ever judge the way you would otherwise? Because if you're whole and complete, the notion of judging just doesn't make any sense. It seems to me.
I suppose in the same way that nor does shame,
Mm.
because those things are all on the same level. They're not one is not a consequence of the other, or even connected to the other. They're just all out there on the outside.
Second last paragraph, he says, you'll feel love instead of shame. Instead of being unwilling to lift your eyes to the divine because of what you've said or done, you'll see the divine as a place of unconditional refuge. What the image that just came to my mind was like a little toddler running back into the arms of their mother. That like no matter, like I just pinch the dog or hit my friend over the head with a toy, but I can run back to the arms of my mother for refuge.
That's from way back in your memory bank, Greg.
I've never done such.
The thing I see about judgment is it creates a separation.
Mm.
Then, the opposite is the oneness.
Mm.
I would say there's probably a long period of my life where I thought judgment was like my superpower.
Mm.
How ridiculous is that?
Doesn't make any sense anymore to me.
Yeah, me neither.
Yeah.
Well, to judge, we have to be separate from ourselves in the first place. It's only then it's like that notion, hurt people, hurt others. It's like when you have judgment upon yourself, it's what you project out there too.
Elaine and I were talking this morning, we were talking about energy. We were talking about many things, but the concept of energy came up, and kind of when we're at peace with ourselves, or grounded, as we may say, that energy is projected out, and somehow that this whole conversation about judgment to me is speaking to that right now. So if we're not separate from ourselves and we're not judging ourselves, then we're unlikely to be projecting or doing that outwardly, is what comes to me in this moment.
One of the realizations I had in the last year in terms of my health and wellness was the importance of loving myself first. Like that was the linchpin to being able to do everything I've been able to do in the last year, which includes dropping judgments about myself, about my age, my weight, my capabilities.
Our thoughts, our feelings. Sorry.
Yeah.
No, I was just going to say, I wonder. I like what you said, Greg. Just suddenly struck me. I thought, well, rather than again, I'm struggling a little bit with it because this idea of sort of something that isn't there and actually talking about it. It's like weird. So the idea, it struck me when you said, the importance of loving myself. Well, that already makes it into form, myself. And also the question, who am I? Well, I'm Greg. I weigh this much. I'm this tall, and I do this, and when I do that, I'll look better, or I won't be better, or if I eat this, whatever. But I'm kind of wondering if it would make any difference at all if it was just, well, if what we say to ourselves is, when I love, full stop, without the myself.
Yeah. What's occurring to me is kind of, he describes, I think it was in this chapter, maybe it was something else I was listening to, probably was, darkness is the absence of light. So it's kind of like loving myself isn't really a thing. It's just the absence of me hating myself or judging myself. And what's left over is connected to that divine love, that realization that, I'm a drop of the ocean. Like, what's not to love when if you are that oneness yourself.
Yeah.
What's left over is the truth.
Mm. It's kind of going back to what I'd read in Asakna pointed out on that. Love is, you don't have to do anything, like it's the natural state. So like loving yourself isn't a thing to do. It's when you stop judging yourself that love is already there. You don't have to make yourself feel that way. That is how spirit feels. That's the line.
What's coming to me at the moment is this notion of like all human beings are sparks of love that haven't like fully realized who we are. Does that make sense? It's like we are the love, but we don't know that we are. So while we don't know that, we get identified in our thinking and our beliefs and all of that. But this whole process is about realizing that, oh no, we are love. And then that realization happens through awareness, which is also part of that love itself. Such a beautiful design when you take a step back to see it all. I just keep on coming back to the innocence of everything we're doing, like the judgment and the expectations and all that stuff. But the more we become, oh, we are that, then all of that stuff just drops away.
And I don't know if this is related or not, but I had an insight on the weekend on the clarity thing when we were looking at those implications of the 100% nature, inside out nature of life. It had to do with resilience, our innate capacity for resilience, and all our innate capacity, I suppose. But it was like, the fact that we have this capacity for resilience presupposes that you're going to need it. Like the reason you have that capacity is because life is hard. Like there's ups and downs, and we will innocently get ourselves into jams or judgments, or I don't know, whatever. But to me, it was just this kind of the answer to like, why is all this stuff happening to me? Well, because that's how life is. But don't worry, you don't need to worry about it, because you've got innate resilience, so you can handle it.
Robin and Ken from Insight Principles, they talk about when they present the principle to business people, I think they talk about it only works one way, inside out, number one. And number two, we're all designed for success. Their version of, oh no, you're resilient, you got this.
Yeah. That was Jamie's, the way he puts it is, you're built for reality, optimized for results.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll close out just by reading the final paragraph. Contemplate this and let go of the idea of a judgmental God. You have a loving God. In truth, you have love itself for a God, and love cannot do other than love. Your God is in ecstasy, and there's nothing you can do about it. And if God is in ecstasy, I wonder what he sees when he looks at you.
You know, Greg, just listening to you, that sentence, in truth, you have love itself for a God. Just for a mere second, this whole personified form of the word God disappeared, and it was just love. And love itself is so formless, you know, and like, I don't know, it was a cool moment, going. It's just, if everything is love, this, we call it, you know, the universal intelligence, or spirit, whatever, but the flavor of love I've just felt as you read that, it's like, oh, that's very calming, very settling, very nurturing, peaceful.
And just as you were speaking there, Asakna, I just suddenly had this idea, like, oh, and I wonder where that comes from. Well, all of that comes from you. Therefore, where is God? He's inside.
I don't know about the rest of you, but this whole exploration of this book with you guys has been amazing. So I just want to thank you all for adapting your schedules and being here as often as you could. I've really enjoyed this one.
Yeah, me too. And thanks, Greg, for setting
Thanks
all
for
of
doing
this
all the
up.
work, Greg.
Yeah.
I agree. This has been a gift.